Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Calm, Clear Mind podcast, brought to you by Kadampa Meditation Centre in Dublin. My name is Barry Walsh, and I'm a member of the team at Tara KMC. And alongside me is our principal teacher, Kadam Adam Star. You're welcome, Kadam Adam. Kadam Adam has been teaching meditation and Buddhism for over 20 years internationally. Under the guidance of the internationally renowned Buddhist and meditation master, Venerable Geshe Kelsang Gyatso Rinpoche. So in these podcasts, what we try to do is have conversations on how we can all keep a calm, clear mind, especially in this turbulent world that we live in. Our format up to date has been, we've been getting questions from people that attended our classes, and I've been putting them to Kadam Adam. We're slightly changing it on this one, where I've formatted the questions myself. So these are questions that I'm particularly interested to hear answers on, and I think most people are. So we're going to give it a try, and hopefully it's interesting and beneficial for you. So without further ado, we'll get stuck in. Welcome, Kadam Adam. How are you?
Yeah, very well, Barry. Thanks. Nice to be with you again.
Good. So we've done a few podcasts now. How are you finding it? How are you finding this format of podcast, even though you've done plenty before this? But yeah, how are you finding this series with me in particular?
Absolutely exhausting.
That's the truth.
No, it's great. I mean, it's great. It's just great to have all these questions. And I mean, what I love about this is it's just really addressing the real world issues and then seeing how this meditation practice is more accessible than maybe people think. And this wisdom is more applicable to our everyday challenges than maybe people are considering at the beginning. And so I just love it. I love the questions have been really rich, quite deep in many of the questions. And obviously today, within your question, there's some blended in from the people in the classes.
Yeah, they're not all my questions.
Yeah, so I think that's lovely. It's nice. It's been a really nice journey, and hopefully, it's useful for people to practice. That's the main thing.
Yeah. Okay. So let's take the first question then. I have it here on the phone. Yeah. How can I take my meditation practice further from basic meditation so that it helps me in my daily life and the challenges that life presents? Problems like stress, anxiety, negativity, these seem to come so easy, yet contentment and happiness are so momentary seldom. Why is that?
Well, I think with this question is often comes up when people, so sometimes when I meet people at the centre in Temple Oak, it's like they come into the classes and they're saying, I've been working with a guided meditation or an app for a while. Maybe it's some simple breathing meditation. I found it really helpful, but I feel like I've hit this ceiling. I can't seem to go any further with that. And actually after a while, it's kind of often people will say, I'm kind of losing my energy for it. I don't really enjoy it the way I used to. And I just feel in this kind of rote approach to meditation. I'm not really feeling much benefit from it. So what happens at that point, it's not that you're inherently doing anything wrong. It's just that you've got to a point where you've seen the limits of that particular style of meditation or that particular approach. So breathing meditation, for example, which is what a lot of people start with at the beginning, focus on your breath, try let go of focusing on anything else. Gradually you start to experience this settling within the mind and a degree of inner peace or peace of mind and natural feelings of happiness and well-being that arise from that. Through that meditation, yes, you can develop wisdom insights through that, where you can begin to discover that peace and happiness that you're feeling at that time is not alien to your mind in the way that you normally would think in a normal busy day. Actually, you discover it's more natural to the mind than we think, and we have a natural source of peace and happiness that can be cultivated through meditation. So you develop that wisdom insight, and you also develop this insight into your potential to change. So that can be great, but what you're experiencing at that time is the temporary peace that comes from settling your mind, the temporary feelings of happiness and well-being that come from settling the mind. But to graduate from that, to actually begin to realize that potential, we can't just stay there. You have to gradually over time begin to improve the level and depth of your meditation practice. So you graduate from the temporary peace of settling your mind to the deeper, longer lasting peace that comes from transforming the mind at the deepest level, meaning transforming how you view yourself, how you view others, how you view life with more wisdom, with more compassion, so that as you're able to live from that place of growing love, compassion, and wisdom in everyday life, you start to increase your capacity to maintain that peace throughout your day, throughout your life, at least to maintain it a lot better than you used to be able to before, but not perfectly, but just a lot better. And then you can continually improve that over time. So what you're doing in that practice is you're moving from the temporary piece of settling your mind and maybe some wisdom insights that come from that if you're doing it correctly, to the deeper, longer lasting piece that comes from the daily work of sitting in meditation to transform your heart, to transform your mind at the deepest level, which is exactly what meditation is. It's that really developing those deep insights, those deep experiences that help you continually maintain inner calm, peace of mind, and feelings of happiness, no matter what's going on in your life. Again, not perfectly at the beginning, but it gets better over time. It's a bit like one thing that struck me when you asked that question, and one thing I think you and I have discussed before, it's like when I first came to meditation, back in the 90s, I absolutely loved it from the get-go. Like I really would genuinely love to sit and meditate. But in the very early days, I was just doing a relatively superficial forms of meditation. Back then, I hadn't even met Buddhist meditation. I was just doing kind of breathing meditation, simple techniques, and I found it really super helpful. But at that time back then, I was in the corporate world in London, and so I had quite a busy job, and still the meditation practice helped me kind of, establish some degree of peace to work with that and some degree of flexibility. But as that job started to really intensify and my career started to grow a little bit more, I took on bigger roles and I started to have a bigger remit, and I was traveling all the time, going to many different countries and around the world. What I found over time is that initial experience of meditation was beginning to buckle quite a lot. I started to notice increasing feelings of stress and anxiety that I was struggling with regularly. I mean, I had been before the meditation practice. The meditation practice had kind of alleviated a bit of that, but not deeply or consistently. But it really started to ramp up as I started to try and balance this new schedule that I was working with and the new demands of my career at quite a young age, really. And so what happened then is I started to realize the only way I was ever going to really begin to improve that situation is if I doubled down and deepened my meditation practice. And so I started to look for better solutions, like, so how do I get deeper than this? And obviously for me, I met the Buddhist meditation tradition, and particularly the Kadampa Buddhist meditation tradition and lineage, and the practices of Kadampa Buddhism. And that for me really brought it alive. I started to realize, oh yeah, there's far deeper levels of this than I thought possible before. And so I started to deepen my experience and started to train more deeply, more regularly. And as I say, it's not that every day was perfect. It absolutely wasn't. But I did notice I could live with a bit more compassion, a bit more wisdom in life, and hold a deeper sense of peace and happiness more of the time in my day and life. And so that became really encouraging. And it's a bit like that with meditation, to the person's question. Or is it your question?
Yeah, my question.
To your question.
Yeah.
It's a bit like that. It's like you eventually understand, it's like the difference between a weekend surfer and a master surfer. Like a weekend surfer, you're
speaking from experience. Then.
Yeah, absolutely. Not from my experience now. From watching people surfing, down at Portmarnock Beach or something. Mind you, not a lot of surfing goes on there. But anyway, so when you watch somebody surfing and they're just on those kind of like light waves, you see them kind of on the waves, just kind of doing body surfing or something. And now again, they stand up and they look quite confident and everything's going quite well. But if a bigger wave hits, they're quite clear at that point that they need to graduate from where they're at to really start to improve their balance and so forth. And it's a bit like that with life. We can deal with the difficulties that come our way, the challenges we meet to a relative degree if we have that simple breathing meditation practice. But one day a tsunami is going to hit you, some health concern or family member passes away or a really intense and painful breakup. You have to have some deeper inner resources within your heart to be able to manage that more effectively, to maintain mental equilibrium, balance, and a sense of perspective. And that's why meditation is like you have to graduate from that weekend surfer to continually improving it till you become a master surfer, so that whatever wave hits you, you can ride that wave, you feel more balanced, you feel more you're able to deal with it. So eventually for everyone, we have to get to that place that, well, we don't have to, you can do what you like, but we have to see for ourselves if we're really trying to get something more deeper out of our meditation practice, we have to evolve it, graduate it. So like this, yeah.
And I assume, especially what you said earlier, like if it starts to flatten, maybe there's a bit of boredom sets in, or you're just not feeling any growth. Because I was wondering as you were saying that, when do we know to move from weekend to master surfer?
Well, I guess, yeah, like you say, it's at that point where you really start to feel your meditation practice should always feel at least active, dynamic, alive, even if it's not always perfect and you're not always particularly enjoying it on any given day. You're using your meditation practice to transform where you're at, to transform how you're experiencing things. So we really need to do that, to deepen this experience of our potential to change. Because on those days when things aren't going the way we want them to do and we're meeting difficulties in our life, if we have this growing confidence that we have this potential for deeper peace, for happiness, for good qualities, if we have that, we're more confident we can do this practice without feeling overwhelmed by these things. So it's that gives you the energy and that deepening refuge and dharma in your heart, or this wisdom in your heart, that gives you the encouragement and the energy to continue practicing. So if it's starting to feel flat, reconnect with, do I have that sense of connection with my potential? Do I understand it's not always going to be perfect? And even on the days when it's not perfect, I feel energized to do some work to change. Well, then your practice is alive. If it goes flat, don't let it go on too long, because eventually you just feel like it's a drudge and it's boring and I don't really want to do it.
Yeah, and just on that, how do you advise people to have that kind of monitoring on your meditation, or kind of reflection on where you're at with your meditation? Because I think I've made the mistake of not having that, and I'm kind of just going on from one day to the next month to the next year. But this kind of checking in on where you're at with your meditation, is there something you do or you'd advise us to do to help that?
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely had it myself. You can go through like quite prolonged periods of a relatively complacent approach to meditation. And I do think we need to be checking in with, not necessarily getting neurotic whether it went really well today, because there are days where meditation is just like, it's like life. Your meditation journey, your meditation practice will reflect your life. So if you're going through a tough period in your life, your meditation practice will reflect that. You're struggling to focus, you're struggling to concentrate. You're struggling to look at life from a peaceful, positive mind. However, if you use your meditation practice to work through the difficulties and challenges of your day in life, it can become deeply healing. It can become deeply transformative. But it's like constantly being aware of how that meditation practice is going. And not, as I say, judging it on a daily basis, but over a longer period. Do I feel like over, say, a period of a year or something, that I feel a deeper sense of peace or happiness than I did the year before, even if it's not amazing? Am I really genuinely progressing? So what I often do is I'll often kind of pause maybe a couple of times in the year at least, where I just look at it and I think, is this really progressing? Have I gone deeper on this particular practice that I was hoping to do this year? Or, do I actually feel there's some progress happening there? Or do I need to go away, do a little bit of retreat to deepen this particular insight or understanding, so that actually when I get back to my meditation practice, I can begin to increase that on a daily basis? So if you don't have the time to do retreats and stuff, it's the work you do on a daily basis that really can deepen that. However, I would say every now and again, pause, like maybe twice a year, you just reflect on how your practice is going, how it went the year before, even write down what your reflections are so you can compare it to the year before, but not getting too heady on it, not getting too caught up in analysing it too much.
Objectives, achievement, that kind of thing.
Yeah, not like that. Just a very relaxed way of just being honest with yourself in your heart. Like that.
Okay, great, thanks. Here's a question from one of the people that have attended our classes. It relates to my question. What it says is, I felt calm when I meditate, but then easily stressed out at work throughout the day. What would you suggest I do differently to avoid these ups and downs?
So if you're feeling calm in meditation and when you get to work, maybe you're easily triggered or stressed out, it's okay. Again, you need to just first kind of be patient with yourself and the process of that you're engaged with, and not expecting that you're going to be perfectly calm and patient when you meet challenging people and situations at work. But if there's a degree of calm in meditation, but increasing stress at work, I would suggest it's like the weekend surfer analogy. It's the difference between a weekend surfer and the master surfer, you need to just encourage yourself gently without judging yourself to improve your meditation practice, meditate at deeper levels in your heart. So again, if the calm is coming from, say, from breathing meditation, and that's what you're doing, and you're feeling that in meditation, and maybe for a little bit after the meditation you feel that, but you're not able to sustain that in your day and your life, that's why you need to deepen the meditation practice. Because it really is about getting to a place in your heart where you connect with your potential to change. You connect with a refuge in your heart. And then you look at your life from the perspective of somebody who feels they can change, who feels they have the potential to change, and has the access to the methods I need to make that change happen, the Dharma, the teachings of Buddha, and so forth. And then looking at life from that perspective, start to look at life with more wisdom, more compassion. Look at the challenges you meet in life with that deeper wisdom that enables you to accept the difficulties you meet and the difficult people and situations you're inevitably going to meet at work that day. So it's like you're preparing your mind for the day ahead. You're not preparing your mind just for the day ahead. You're preparing your mind for your life ahead, and from a Buddhist point of view, lifetimes ahead.
Yeah, and taking that longer term view.
You're investing. Every day you're investing in a better way to approach every day. And so when you're investing in that way, you start to think, okay, maybe it's not perfect today, but I'm getting better at it each day. And let's say you have a stressed out day today. Take that into your meditation session tomorrow and look at it with wisdom. Try and see if you can develop a deeper acceptance of difficult people and situations. And so that from that perspective, you're using the challenges of the previous day to increase your peace, happiness, wisdom, compassion, acceptance on this day. And so you go into work the next day feeling a little bit more resilient, a little bit more prepared. So for that person, I'd encourage to explore for yourself, where's your meditation practice at? I mean, is it just sitting and doing breathing meditation, which, by the way, is great at the beginning, but it has to deepen if you're going to get into work and be able to manage that. And one final point with respect to that, it's really important that we all understand it's where we meditate from determines the effectiveness of our meditation practice. So often when people are meditating, they think it's not really helping me. So I'm reflecting maybe on the practice of patient acceptance. I'm trying my best to accept the difficult people and situations in my life. And when I sit down to meditate, I reflect a little bit how difficult people and difficult situations are normal. And when it's happening, what I really need to do is just accept it, be at peace with it so I can work with it without feeling overwhelmed by it. So we may be reflecting on that in meditation, but where we're reflecting from is really important. Often we're just intellectually thinking about that, conceptually imagining that, but not really contemplating it very deeply in our heart. So in the book, Mirror of Dharma with Additions, Geshe Kelsang talks about this, and we may have talked about it on a previous podcast too, but I think it's a really important point. He says, unless the meditation object is coming from the depths of our heart, meaning when we're focused on it and we're generating this determination to accept, for example, unless it comes from the depths of our heart, it can't function in our daily life. And so often people are just meditating on these concepts in their head, thinking about it intellectually. But what we really need to be doing is contemplating it deep in our heart. So when we sit to meditate, we need to settle the mind with a breathing meditation, or we can drop it deeper into a more subtle, more peaceful mind at our heart through engaging in a meditation like the absorption of cessation meditation, which for people who've never heard of it before, it's like imagining your mind like going like a block of wood or becoming like a block of wood. And what you do is when you do that, you imagine the mind becoming inanimate and still, and it helps all your busy conceptual thoughts and distractions to dissolve and cease. And as a result of that, you start to access a more subtle, not necessarily a subtle, but a more subtle, more spacious, more peaceful mind at your heart. And that's where you want to be meditating from, including a sense of your potential to change and that potential we all have for deeper peace and happiness. Now, when you contemplate, which is one of the aspects of the meditation session, contemplate this wisdom in your heart, you generate this deep acceptance in your heart. I'm going to accept difficult people and situations because it's normal, and when it's happening, it helps me deal with it better. When you deeply accept that in your heart in meditation, what you'll notice is when you meet difficult people and situations in your daily life, you've established through your daily meditation practice an increasing degree of mindfulness or non-forgetfulness to be able to hold that acceptance in your heart. And as soon as you can accept the challenging people and situations that you meet in your life, you immediately dissipate any potential stress, because the stress in your mind and work in this question, the stress you're feeling in your mind is the tension between what you want to be happening and what's actually happening. So what you want to be happening, obviously, like all of us, is no difficult people or situations. But what you actually have is a difficult person or situation at work. Now, the tension that we feel in the mind is not coming from what's happening out there. It's coming from us grasping strongly at us wanting it to be different in here. So if we let go of that tension and stress initially and then just allow ourselves to accept it deeply, then we'll be able to deal with the stress more consistently. So what I'd say to that person's question is, one of the reasons why we're struggling to overcome stress at work and so forth, and yet we're calm when we're in meditation, is we need to meditate from a deeper place in our heart and meditate on this deeper wisdom in our heart that enables us to function with a deeper peace, happiness and acceptance in everyday life.
Thanks for that, Adam. Could you just say a little bit more about that actual meditation? You know, in the previous episode, you talked about what meditation is and its function. You were talking there about, you know, the contemplation, and we know there's 2 stages to the meditation. Could you just make that really clear for our listeners as to what those 2 stages are?
Yeah. So meditation, again, when we're talking about meditation, becoming deeply familiar with these internal causes of peace and happiness, virtues such as love, compassion, and wisdom, that evolved practice of meditation, which in one sense it's evolved, but it's just what I mean by that is actually what meditation is when we understand it in its full context. So again, like many people think, breathing meditation is temporary peace of settling my mind. That's a part of a meditation practice. But actual meditation is focusing the mind without distraction on something you can prove through your own direct experience is giving rise to an ever-increasing peace and happiness. And when we talk about meditation in that context, what we're really talking about is focusing the mind on virtues such as love, compassion, or wisdom, and so forth. And through that, we're cultivating this deeper peace and happiness as we become more familiar with those states of mind. We in the technical definition is focusing the mind single-pointedly on a virtuous object, which increases our inner peace, our inner calm, and our happiness. Okay. So what we mean by that is we generate, so for example, a feeling of love, and we hold it deep in our heart, and we remain with that feeling of love moment by moment, and the mind becomes increasingly more loving, so that when we're going about our day and our life, we feel this warm-hearted feeling of love. We feel this cherishing of others, feeling they're important, their happiness matters. And we feel this experience of this wishing love, wishing for them to be happy in this context, for example. Now, to explain to your question about the 2 parts of meditation, there's 2 sections to meditation that when we're engaged in the meditation, we can explain it simply today. There's the contemplation and then there's the meditation. So we contemplate, for example, the kindness of others if we want to generate a feeling of love. We contemplate how others benefit us in many different ways. We contemplate their potential for kindness and good qualities so that we generate within our heart this warm-hearted feeling of love, principally through contemplating the kindness of others. As we do that, as we contemplate the kindness of others, the benefit we receive from their actions and how everyone in some way in reality is benefiting us, we generate this warm-hearted feeling of love. So through the contemplation, deep in your heart, not in your head, we start to generate this warm-hearted feeling of love. Now, when we generate the feeling of love at that time, then this is the aspect where we start to hold that feeling of love in our heart with mindfulness, remain with that feeling of love through concentration, so that we transform the mind. The whole mind becomes the nature of love and meditation. That particular stage is what we call meditation. Okay. So you have contemplation to get to the object of meditation, in this case, the object meaning the feeling of love. And then you have meditation where you hold it, remain with it, and experience it at deeper and deeper levels. So these 2 parts are what we call the meditation session, contemplation and meditation.
That's brilliant. That's great. It's really clear. So look, following on then from what you talked about, you know, like that meditation and cultivating love, I have a question here on love. Why can our closest relationships be the most challenging? And why does our love sometimes feel weak? Or maybe that's just me, I don't know.
I'm sure it isn't you, but anyway, I think it's normal. I mean, again, you know, I think we have to understand that anyone who feels close to you, inevitably we're going to have challenges with. Just because our mind, again, whether we're aware of it or not, we're burdened by these tendencies of mind that really these, what we call the delusions, these distorted ways we relate to ourselves, others in the world around us that continually disturb and actually destroy our peace of mind. So minds like anger. In this context, I would say also strong desires, attachment, ignorance, jealousy, and so forth. So we all have these tendencies within the mind, whether we're consciously aware of them or not, they're there and they're functioning. And so when you have somebody close in your life, let's say somebody you do genuinely and deeply love, the pain you're experiencing in the relationship with that person is not coming from your love for the other person. Love can never cause any harm. Our love, whenever we have real love in our heart for people, our mind's always at peace. So then we ask the question, why is it that when I love somebody, I have a lot of pain? The pain is coming from the attachment in the mind, this delusion, this distorted way of relating to them that's continually disturbing our mind. So we have a genuine, for example, somebody in our life, we have a genuine warmth and love for them. But at the other side of it, it's mixed with this attachment. The good news is attachment is a delusion. It's a distorted way of seeing things. It's based on a mistaken exaggeration of how you're seeing things. And we can become free of it. It's just a tendency in the mind or habit of mind that we can gradually become free of. If we do this deeper work in meditation in our heart, we can recognize the tendency, begin to reduce the tendency, abandon the tendency of attachment, and become completely free of it one day. And if we were completely free of it, we would just have that warm-hearted feeling of love and cherishing of others. But because we're not free of it, it causes pain in relationships, especially when we get close to someone. So what is this attachment? Basically, attachment's an exaggerating mind. Let's say I meet somebody and there's something about them that we really connect, or we have some karma, we connect with that person. And as a result of that, that person appears to us to be, really lovely. We really enjoy being with them. And so at some level, there'll be some love there, maybe some warm-hearted feeling of love for that person. But the attachment is where we begin to exaggerate the qualities we see in the person. Now, we're not necessarily consciously aware of this, but when you learn to train in meditation, you learn to really understand your mind at deeper levels so that you can see this attachment arising in the mind, what it can do to the mind. However, when we're not aware of it, that attachment mind will exaggerate the good qualities we see in the other person. And as a result of that exaggeration, all we see is this person who's standing in front of us who has the power to make me happy. And we get attached to this idea that this person can make me happy from their own side. So that's why we say to people, like, for example, I love you, you make me happy all the time, at least at the beginning. And then we complain about how they're making us miserable most of the time. So what's happening is this attachment mind is exaggerating the qualities in the person and attaching to this idea that this person is a true source of happiness. They can make me happy all the time. Now, we're not largely consciously aware of that process, but before we know it, we've attached to this idea. So then we have this unrealistic expectations of this person. They should be making me happy. That's their job. And of course, that person can't make themselves happy all the time because they struggle to make themselves happy most of the time, just like us. They're just a normal person. But the attachment in the mind is causing issues with us in the relationship. It's that kind of love-hate relationship. I love you, you make me happy, and I hate you when you don't. And so if you're not living up to my expectations, I get frustrated with you, I get upset with you, and then I assume that that's because I love you. It's not, it's because I have this attachment in my mind that I haven't resolved with respect to you. If I could gradually see that's just a mistake in mind and I could become free of it and train in the methods to gradually release my mind from the grip of it, then what you do is you just liberate that love so that you have this warm-hearted feeling of love and cherishing of this person. And in that way, then even when you're close to them, you can maintain that warmth and love. Instead of expecting them or having these unrealistic expectations that they should be making you happy all the time, you have this experience of gradually over time, you have this experience of letting go of the attachment. And therefore the expectations begin to reduce and you can maintain your love for them. And if you have love for them, that's what's bringing you the happiness anyway. I don't need you to make me happy all the time. In reality, you can't make me happy all the time, but my love for you is bringing me peace and happiness most of the time. And the deeper the love, the more I'll feel that peace and happiness all of the time. So it's not that we ever have to lose our love for somebody or move away from other people in that sense. What we need to do is gradually, slowly recognize the attachment within the mind, use our meditation practice in our daily life to let it go more and more over time, and then always maintain that love for them continually more and more. And then we can expand that love, not just for them, but for our family, our friends. Gradually you start to realize the more I let go of attachment, the more I can learn to love everyone.
And is that possible, do you think? To love everyone?
I don't know. I'm still working on it. I think it's entirely possible, but we have to develop the confidence in our heart that it's possible for us through our own training. I can say after all of this training, after all of these years, I definitely feel it's possible myself. I'm still working on that, making it a possibility in my everyday life. But the more you let go of the attachment, it liberates your mind to just love people, to accept people as they are, that they're not perfect and they can't make me happy all the time.
Yeah.
Because they can't make themselves happy much of the time. So why should I expect anyone to do that for me? And so I don't need to. If I take refuge in my love for people, I don't need to have these unrealistic expectations of people. It doesn't mean you don't challenge people when they're saying things that you think are inappropriate or wrong. You do challenge them, but we can always challenge from a place of love instead of unrealistic expectations that everybody should be perfect.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. Next question. I know distractions are a big obstacle to my mindfulness and concentration. What advice would you give, and especially with our much love-hated smartphones?
Love-hate relationship with your smartphone.
Yeah.
But again, I think the love-hate relationship with the smartphone is due to our attachment.
Right.
We get attached to these objects thinking like every time I look at my smartphone, there's something there that's giving me some temporary pleasure or relief. We get very attached to the smartphone as a source of happiness. But then, of course, it doesn't give us the happiness we seek. And then we think, I'm going to put that smartphone away for a week and never look at it again. Again, it's the attachment that creates this aversion. We could have a smartphone and use it practically and, whatever we need. But if we didn't have the strong attachment to them, we wouldn't have all the problems we have with them.
It's a really good example of what you were talking about earlier, isn't it?
I guess so, yeah.
And, the interesting thing is that, I don't know about others, but, I never seem to get the satisfaction I want from my smartphone. I go to it, hoping to get something, but it just never delivers. So it's ironic that I'm attached to something that never delivers.
Well, there's the answer to the question. I think that's what's important, is for us all to kind of just look at our own lives. Like that, I think when we're having these podcasts, and me sitting here answering these questions, all I'm really doing is just, for all of us, me included, just creating space for us all to pause and reflect a bit on our own life. Not saying dogmatically, you should do this or you should do that. It's just like, let's all just reflect on our life. So if we're wanting to improve our mindfulness and our concentration and meditation, meaning our capacity to experience deeper levels of peace, happiness, and good qualities of the heart in meditation, well, then you've got to just pause a little bit and reflect on your life. What is it? How am I using my time? And when I use my time in that way, is it a good return on investment for me over time? So if I spend most of my day constantly checking my smartphone, is it really returning? Am I getting a return on that investment of my time? Like, time nowadays is our most precious commodity.
Yeah, and we say we don't have enough.
We don't have enough. Like, everybody's saying that I never have enough time. Do you know what I mean? And the more responsibilities you take on, the bigger your family gets, the more responsibility you have with your career, time becomes incredibly precious. Yet you can kind of waste hours just checking social media or, scrolling through streaming platforms, whatever. Yeah. And then I'm not saying that people should dogmatically say you should do this or do that. What I'm saying is you should ask yourself, is that giving me what I really want? Because again, if we go back to the question we're exploring a lot on these podcasts, is what is it in your heart you really want more than anything? And if you check, like Buddha said, that the two things we want more than anything is to just simply be happy and to be free from suffering and problems. That's what everybody longs for in their heart. Happiness is a state of mind. It comes from peace of mind. If you have increasing peace of mind, you're naturally happy. The more peaceful your mind becomes, and through this training you do that, you increase your peace of mind. The more peaceful your mind becomes, the naturally happier you feel. Happier you feel moment to moment to moment independent upon your capacity to maintain peace of mind or inner peace moment to moment to moment. And the more inner peace you have, and the more you release the mind from the burden of these unhealthy habits of mind, such as attachment, that burden of mind, the more you release your mind from the grip of those, the more you experience this deeper inner peace, which is also the experience of increasing freedom from suffering. So ask yourself, is the time I'm investing in my various distractions, whether it's smartphones or whatever else you feel like, watching hours of streaming platforms, is it really, for me, giving me a return on investment? Meaning, am I finding a deeper happiness through that? A deeper, more consistent happiness through that, or just moments of temporary relief and pleasure? Am I experiencing increasing freedom from suffering, or is it increasing my distraction, my agitation, my negative minds by constantly streaming platforms that are, or social media platforms that are bothering and disturbing my mind? If it's not, then pause it. Put it to one side for a while and try training something that actually you can prove through your own experience can help you find that deeper peace and happiness. And that's where, when you make that decision to put a bit more time into your daily meditation practice, you'll start to improve your concentration, you'll start to improve your meditation, and what you'll notice is you start to gradually reduce the need for distraction.
Right.
Because we only ever crave what we lack. If you feel like in some way you lack happiness, or you lack enjoyment, or you lack joy, you're going to seek it outside of yourself if you feel it's not possible within yourself. But if you start to find it within yourself, as you train and improve your mindfulness and your concentration and meditation, you'll start to know that you can carry that peace and happiness more into your day and your life, and you're naturally reduce the tendencies towards distraction, because we only crave what we lack. We are distracted by the things that we think will give us in some way some pleasure, some happiness, some moments of joy. But when you find a deeper peace, a deeper happiness, and a deeper joy within yourself through that daily meditation practice, applying those insights and experiences to your day and life, you start to notice your distraction tendency is naturally reducing. And then there's more work to be done over time to become free of it, especially becoming free of attachment, which generates it. And then what you can do then is you start to feel encouraged and energized. Now I'm beginning to increase my capacity for mindfulness and concentration as I begin to deepen my experience. And I feel this natural feedback loop. This is what I want to do. I'm not having to do this. I'm enjoying doing this.
Great, yeah. You've mentioned two things that I think we all struggle with, in terms of attachment. So you mentioned, relationships and trying to find happiness in another person. And then laterally you mentioned about our smartphones. Isn't the great deception that we think that, somehow or someday they will deliver? We will find this happiness. How do we overcome that great deception of these things, external things, are going to make me happy?
So I guess you just got to see it for yourself over time through exploring your life with more wisdom, exploring your day and everything that's going on in your life, and just beginning to ask yourself a few questions is, when are they going to deliver? Like when? Because we've been doing this from a Buddhist point of view since beginningless time. Our whole life.
Smartphones around that long?
No.
But all these external objects.
Our whole life we've been looking outside of ourselves for something that's going to deliver a deeper, longer lasting happiness and freedom from suffering. And yet, if we're constantly focused outside of ourselves, the one guarantee evidence you're going to find with that is you've never found it. I mean, I'd love to meet somebody who's found happiness by constantly focusing on the externals. What I mean by that, you can find happiness, like momentarily, temporarily. You can even go through a good patch in your life where you're relatively happy and things are going well. But what we're really talking about is resolving the deepest longing that we have in our heart, which is everybody just simply wants to be happy and free from suffering consistently and deeply. And that's why we're constantly looking out there, because the moments of pleasure, or the moments of joy, or the moments of fleeting pleasure we get from things going right out there, or us getting a new object or a new situation, they come and go so quickly. And then we're constantly pursuing the next moment. It's like being on this treadmill where we're constantly just getting these happiness hits, but not feeling deeply happy within ourselves consistently. That only comes through doing something different. Happiness is an inside job. It doesn't come from outside yourself. It comes from inner peace or peace of mind. And that inner peace or peace of mind comes from your capacity to maintain a consistently peaceful, positive mind in everyday life. That capacity to maintain a consistently peaceful, positive mind in everyday life, for example, looking at yourself and others with more love, more compassion, looking at life with more wisdom that understands what leads to a happy and meaningful life. Those peaceful, positive minds that give rise to inner peace and happiness come from training in meditation to deepen your familiarity with those so that you develop a natural mindfulness of those in daily life. If you're not doing that kind of work regularly and consistently, you'll never find what you really long for. And that's why most people feel they'll never find it, or if they think they can find it, they're obsessed about getting all these external conditions right out there so they can feel that deeply and consistently out here. But please show me one person who's found happiness that way. I mean deeply and consistently, no matter what's going on in your day and your life. I would suggest for everyone to explore that for yourself. I've never met anybody, because you never will, because happiness comes from inner peace.
Fantastic. Okay, next question. How can I let go of old resentments that are so deep-rooted? For example, struggling to love a family member where there's a long history of not being able to trust them, knowing they're struggling with delusions but not feeling safe to be close with them, to practice love.
Yeah.
How
I mean,
can I let go?
I think when we have these challenges with our family and, some deep-rooted resentments, as the person suggests, and they know the person's struggling with delusions, but they still find it hard to just love them and accept them and so forth. I think a little bit, again, starts with yourself.
Oh, no.
So, I'm going to say this, classic Buddhist statement. It all starts with us. But, as you said, I think on a previous podcast, that's what makes it so empowering.
Yeah.
It's because if you're waiting for them.
That's what I find.
Yeah, if you're waiting for them to change, or you're waiting for them to become more kind and more caring and more compassionate, you could be waiting a very long time, because unless they're doing the deeper inner work that we need to do first, unless they're doing that, there's no way they're just going to naturally, spontaneously change. I mean, it may be that they may change a little bit around the edges, but deep inside they'll feel they can't change, and so they'll respond and be triggered by everything they responded to and were triggered by previously. So the empowering aspect of this is we have to take responsibility for our own mind. As much of a burden as that feels at the beginning, it's incredibly liberating and empowering over time. So we need to look in our own mind and start to ask ourselves, so what is the problem here? Is it them? Well, our answer immediately will be, yes, of course it is them. What else would it be?
Yeah, and if we didn't have them behaving that way, we wouldn't have a problem.
Exactly. And so we make that clear distinction again, as we do within this lineage and this training, between an outer problem, their behavior, the way they're acting and so forth, and the inner problem, me being disturbed by that. There's the challenge. We need to first resolve this inner problem, and then we can deal with the outer problem. The real problem is we can't seem to accept them as they are, because we think they should be other than what they are. And often it's because we're attached not necessarily to the person, but to the idea, which we can be attached to anything, like we said earlier on, people, smartphones, or even ideas, that people should be polite, people should be kind, people should be patient, people should treat me with the respect that I feel I deserve. Unfortunately, the problem with life is it just isn't that way. It just isn't that way. I mean, we'd all love it to be that way. I'd love it to be that way. The reality is it isn't that way. And so we need to get to a place where we can just accept and be at peace with the reality of life, which is people can be rude, people can be, bullying, and people can so forth. But when we accept that in our hearts, and we understand that that's just the way things are at the moment, we're at peace with the way they are moment to moment. We're at peace with the reality in front of us, this person. And instead of carrying all this anger and resentment in our mind, we start to begin to move beyond that. So the anger and resentment that we're carrying at that time is because they maybe said something to us or did something that we feel deeply hurt us. And then as a result, we got angry with them. And that anger we never resolved, because maybe at the time we just didn't even know how we could resolve it. And that then eventually leads to resentment, which is simply anger not forgotten. You carry it in your heart. Every time you see them, it's triggered by it. So as with the question, you start to want to move away from them more and more. So if we start to resolve the problems we have with people in our hearts and start to really accept I'll always meet difficult people in situations, including this person. That's just the way life is. We at least come to peace with that situation. We're not generating anger. We can, through our meditation practice, let go of any old anger and resentment. And also understanding that I can only be triggered by them if I'm relating to some very ordinary sense of me that can't deal with this. As we train in these methods, you realize that ordinary sense of self that can't deal with people who don't like me or people who criticize me. You realize that sense of self that you're grasping at doesn't reflect who you truly are. It just reflects habits of mind that you're stuck in, overly identifying with somewhat mistakenly, and then living from as if it's the truth consistently. But in this training, you begin to learn that actually that's not true at all. There is no fixed me. There's no fixed self here. There's no ordinary me who can't deal with life. There's just me struggling with dealing with life at the moment. And you gradually move away from that and start to relate to your potential to live with more love, more compassion, more wisdom, more acceptance. And as a result of living from that potential, you're not so easily triggered when they say something you don't want to hear or do something you don't want them to do. You start to live from that deeper wisdom. People will say and do things I don't want to hear and do. And then you'll be able to accept that more over time. As soon as you start to learn to accept them more deeply in your heart, then what can happen over time, at least gradually over time, not perfectly at the beginning, is you can start to develop some deeper compassion for them. We need to combine the practice of acceptance and compassion that enables us to accept them, be at peace with them, and forgive them. So in the book, How to Solve Our Human Problems, Geshe Kelsang talks about this in quite in depth, how we train in the practice of the patience of non-retaliation. Yeah. Instead of retaliating to people's bad behavior or holding anger and resentment for their ongoing behavior, we learn to accept people will say and do things all the time that I don't want to hear and say. But the reason why they're doing that is because they're struggling with their own minds. We're all struggling with our own minds. That's the reality of this situation we're all in. Yeah. We have these unhealthy habits of mind, these delusions. They're constantly struggling to manage our minds and to manage our emotions and behaviors. And so when you see that person saying something that you don't want to hear or they're being angry with you, just remind yourself what you're really seeing is the struggles that person has with their mind. And that way, at least, it opens a space where we can develop some deeper compassion for them and acceptance of them. And it's that understanding, that deeper wisdom. We think in some way they are in control of their mind when they're angry. Are you ever in control of your mind when you're angry? Your mind's completely in control of you, wielding you like a brickbat through your relationships with others. And so then what's happening is that person's mind is completely controlled by their anger, and they're saying and do things that they would never say and do when they're in a better place. And so in that space, we want to just connect with that. Actually, what I'm seeing is the struggles they're having with their mind, the suffering they're experiencing at this time. And then it enables us to open up a space where we have some more compassion for them. Doesn't necessarily mean that we accept their behavior in any way. Mm-hmm. We just simply have that compassion. And then maybe we challenge their behavior and say, this isn't helping you. It's not helping anyone else in your life. You've got to move beyond this. Maybe in time we can have that conversation.
So it's where you're responding from, you're saying in this case, you respond out of compassion as opposed to resentment, as he said in the question, or anger back to the person that's got angry with you. So it's where you respond from. Is that correct?
Totally, yeah. I mean, all of life, if we really want a truly happy life, a life that's increasingly free from suffering, it's where you live from, not what's happening out there. That's really the truth of a happy life. It's just where you're living from. Mm. If you're living from a peaceful mind and a good heart of increasing love, compassion, and wisdom, whatever's happening in the world, you can deal with it all with increasing peace of mind, happiness, not suffering so much. But again, that's not easy. It's not like, we can all live from a peaceful mind and a good heart today. Yeah. It's a process of change and a journey, but it's creating that time in your daily life to sit down and meditate and to gain these deeper experiences that's so important. And then over time, to be carrying that into your life. And then you start to see how I can deal with things in a more mentally and emotionally healthy way without feeling overwhelmed by people and situations. But it is a journey. It's not like you just flick a switch and we're all good to go. Mm. But at least every day of the journey makes dealing with everything out there a lot better, a lot more manageable.
One of the things I've experienced myself is when you start to make a bit of progress and you start to, as you said, live from that, wiser place, that more compassionate place. I've gone through this phase. I think I've come out of it, but I'm sure I drop back into it, which is, so this person is behaving in in a negative way, hurtful way, etc. And that's what they're struggling with and where they're at. So the question I want to ask is the difference and the danger of feeling sympathy or pity versus compassion. Is that something that you've come across as well?
Yeah, definitely. And I've definitely come across in myself, many times, that kind of sympathy versus compassion thing. So that will, as you say, and I think you're indicating through your own experience of training these methods, that will definitely fade over time, the sympathy versus compassion. Because sympathy is really like where you're connecting with another person where they're at and you're feeling sorry for them. Compassion is where you're connecting with where another person's at and really wanting to help them become free of that suffering. Because deep in your heart, you know you've been there and are there. And also you know that there is a method and a path to become free of that suffering over time. Sympathy is like, oh, poor you. Mm. In some way, when somebody's feeling that, and again, please don't judge yourself if you do feel that, there is a degree of compassion in there. But there's also this, poor you, you're in such a bad situation, whereas I'm in such a good situation. So it's almost like a little bit, it's you that's suffering, not me. So you're not really facing your own reality, which is everyone suffers. It's normal. In this, as we call it within the Buddhist context, and we've talked about in previous podcasts, Buddha called this experience we have of life, or this journey of life we're on at the moment, as samsara. And in that samsara, suffering and problems are entirely normal. Meaning there's never a day in your life where, at some degree, there isn't some experience of suffering or problems. And so those sufferings and problems, they come from these unhealthy habits of minds, these delusions we've been looking at today. They come from our anger and our attachment and our aversion to others that generates and so forth. The confusion in our mind with the way things really are, it's those tendencies that we all have within our mind create this experience of suffering and problems in our day, what Buddha called, again, it sounds exotic, samsara, but it's just our experience of life at the moment. However, the only way that you progress in this training and, you begin to let go of the sympathy and start to develop a deeper compassion for others is when you realize we're all in the same boat. I'm in this samsara as well. It's a bit like, imagine this samsara like an ocean. One person's in the Titanic having a lovely time and the other person's in a rubber dinghy. They're all on that ocean. The rubber dinghy person may be like particularly vulnerable at the moment and having a really terrible time with the waves moving around, but the person on the Titanic is having a great time at the moment. But at some point, every one of them are vulnerable to sinking. And so the person who's on the Titanic saying, poor you in the rubber dinghy, what they're not aware of is, just like them, they could sink at any time. Something can go wrong in their life or something go wrong in their mind and they experience intense suffering. So on this path of training and developing more love and more compassion, you start to realize the start of the journey is, I'm suffering. I'm struggling with my mind. I have these delusions within my mind. I need to become free of those sufferings within my mind through this training and meditation, applying these practices in my daily life to reduce the causes of suffering within my mind, these delusions. And as you become increasingly free of them, what happens is the more peace you have, the more freedom you're experiencing, even if it's not perfect, but you're on a journey to improving that, then you start to connect with where everyone else is at. Well, of course, they're in the same boat as me. We're on the same ocean of samsara. And then you start to really connect with that person suffering. However, your compassion, initially you're moved to the suffering of another person. So what moves you is your love for people. You're moved to their suffering. And you understand that this person is suffering, but you also understand they have the causes of suffering within their mind that just like you, they can become free of more and more over time. And just like you are becoming more and more free over time. So your compassion moves you to their suffering and you're moved to that suffering. Compassion itself is focused on the solution. How do I help them discover those potentialities within their minds or those things that burden their mind, and how do I help them begin to see how they can become free of that over time? So compassion is really focused on the solution, not just suffering. Often people think compassion is just focused on the suffering. But then if you're doing that, you feel very depressed and discouraged, and eventually you start to feel there's nothing I can do to help people. Whereas true compassion, Yes, I can see that person suffering, but I also understand they have the potential to become free, and I can help them with that, discovering that potential, become gradually free. The causes of suffering that lie within our mind are not a fixed inherent part of the mind. They're just what we're all burdened with at this point in time. And what you can discover is the essential nature of the mind is pure and peaceful. As you start to begin to liberate your mind from the grip of these unhealthy thoughts, feelings, emotions, and delusions, you start to realize, actually, I can access that pure, peaceful nature of my mind. I can become increasingly free of what's burdening my mind, and so can everyone else. So instead of sympathy, poor you, and I'm fine, it's compassion, empathy and compassion that moves to them and that understands they can become free too. So I understand your suffering because I understand I'm suffering, but I understand you can be free from suffering because I'm understanding through my own direct experience and becoming gradually, at least, more and more free from suffering.
Wonderful. And does the compassion necessarily involve taking some action or not? Do I have to do something to help that other person other than, contemplate it and view it in the way that you described?
I've never understood compassion other than it coming from giving rise to action.
Okay.
I mean, compassion itself is just this wish and this determination to help others come free from their suffering. So if I have this determination to help others liberate themselves from the causes of suffering within their hearts, within their minds, and the experience of suffering it generates in their life, if I have that deep, heartfelt compassion, that is compassion itself. But compassion always leads to action. Okay. There's no way you can just sit and watch others suffering and know that something can be done about it without doing something about it. So compassion always moves us to action. If your compassion isn't moving you to action to do something to help others with their suffering, even just practically, it's probably not compassion.
Brilliant, yeah.
Ultimately, I mean, because I don't think you can possibly have compassion in your heart without acting to do something to help others. It can often be, well, I'm sorry for you, I feel for you, but I'm not really going to do anything about it. I can't imagine that to be anything to do with compassion. Of course, there's everything we can do about it. Even if I can't help them immediately and directly, I can deepen my own experience in meditation and practices in my daily life to increase my capacity to help people more and more, even if I can't help them perfectly now.
Yeah, look, I think that's there's so much more there that we could explore, and maybe in another podcast we could do that. The whole area of compassion and wisdom, and that's what these conversations are all about. But unfortunately, that we've come to an end of this session. And thanks very much, Kadam Adam, for your time and for your wisdom and all that you've shared with us today. I'm hoping that it's been helpful for our listeners. And even if you can just take one thing from today that can help you be more calm and clear in your mind, then that would be good. If you want to join us for future episodes, just hit the follow or the subscribe button, and we'll catch up with you then. Until then, thank you, Kadam Adam, and bye for now.